Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the I Am Podcast. I'm Charles Beyer, your host, and today we're going there. We're going somewhere that I think a lot of people, Christians, skeptics, seekers, everybody in between wrestled with at some point or another. See, about 3 weeks ago, I received a message from a listener, and thank you all for listening, especially sending your thoughts and prayers and donations. That all means the world to us. It makes such an impact on what we're doing, and I'm looking forward to, and it's coming really, really soon, to introducing the entire fish universe. I think that it's going to really tell a story of the journey that we've been on and the mission that God has presented us with. But the message, this listener, here's her message verbatim. I listen to you all on occasion. I'm not sure what I really think, but one thing I do believe is God was mean. So many times in the Bible, you see him overreacting and punishing cruelly. Look at how he killed Uzzah. The ark was being transported on a cart. The oxen stumbled, and Uzzah reaches out to steady it. Seemingly a reflexive, well-intentioned act, and God strikes him dead on the spot. It feels wildly disproportionate. The guy was trying to keep the ark from falling. Even David was angry and afraid after it happened. This was deeply unjust. Even when God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, there are so many instances like this. I just don't get it. The God you speak of as being so loving, that's not the God I see. I have personal experiences that reflect this God, not the one you share. Chastity. Thank you, Chastity. First, for taking the time to share your opinion. Second, for clearly continuing to seek answers. I say this with all sincerity. Don't give up. He's listening and feels your pain. To you all of you. I'm sure you have heard it. Maybe you've said the same thing yourself. Maybe somebody said it to you at work or at a dinner party, on the internet. Look, I hear it often. The God of the Old Testament is angry. He's vengeful. I hear this. I hear he's mean. He's wiped out cities. He's flooded the whole earth. He told armies to go to war. How can a God that you worship act like this? And if we're being honest, if we're sitting here just being real, that's a fair question. So these messages completely fair on the surface. If you're just skimming through, if you're just simply reading through Genesis and Exodus and Judges, and you're not asking why, yeah, it can look rough. It can look harsh. But chastity, here's what I want you to do today. I want you to pull back the curtain. I want you to slow down and actually look at what was happening, why God did what he did, and how it all, every single bit of it, was pointed towards the most radical act of love the universe has ever seen. Because here's my thesis today, and I'm going to say this right up front. God was not mean. God was a father fighting for his children in a world that was trying to destroy them. So buckle up, Chastity. I hope you're watching. We're going Old Testament to New Testament, beginning to end. All right. Let's start at the very beginning. Genesis chapter 1. God created the heavens and the earth. He speaks light into darkness. He separates the waters. He fills the skies with stars. He makes animals. He makes the land. And then, and this is so important, he makes humanity. And what does he say? He says, let us make man in our image. In our image. That is an astounding statement. Out of everything he made, the mountains, the oceans, the galaxies, he looks at human beings and says, this one is like me. He breathes his own breath into Adam's lungs. He doesn't do that with the animals. He doesn't do that with the trees. He does that with us. And then he puts them in a garden, not a battlefield, not a courtroom, a garden, a place of provision, intimacy, beauty. He walks with them in the cool of the day. There's no wall between God and man, no sin, no shame, no separation. This is what God wanted. This is the original design. Closeness, relationship, freedom. And that word freedom matters because God gave Adam and Eve a choice. He gave them one rule, one tree they weren't supposed to eat from. And that tree wasn't there because God was being controlling. That tree was there because love without choice isn't love. It's programming. God wanted a family, not a collection of robots. So right from the beginning, understand this. God set up a world built on love and freedom. That's the foundation. Remember that, because everything that comes after has to be understood through that lens. Now, we know what happens next. The serpent shows up. He does what the enemy always does. He twists God's words. He says, did God really say that? He plants doubt. He makes God look like he's withholding something. And Adam and Eve eat the fruit. And in that moment, something cracks. Something fractures at the deepest level of reality. Sin enters the human experience. And sin isn't just breaking a rule. Sin is a corruption. It's a corrosion. It's a disease that gets into everything, destroys everything. It's in our relationships. It's in our bodies. It's in the ground beneath our feet. So suddenly there's shame. There's hiding. There's blame. Adam points at Eve. Eve points at the serpent. Nobody takes responsibility. And here's what I need you to catch. Even in that moment, the very first moment of human failure, what does God do? He goes looking for them. Adam, where are you? He didn't say, that's it, I'm done. He didn't wipe them out on the spot. He went looking for them. He pursued them. And then, Genesis 3:21, he makes garments of skin to cover them. An animal had to die to cover their shame. That's the first blood sacrifice in the Bible. God is the one who performed it. Right there in chapter 3, he's already foreshadowing the cross. But here's the hard truth. The fracture was real. Sin didn't just affect Adam and Eve. It spread. It got into their kids. Cain killed Abel. One generation in, and there's already murder. And it just kept going. It kept getting worse. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, the flood. Genesis chapter 6-9. God floods the entire earth. That sounds extreme, right? That sounds harsh. But let's actually read what the Bible says about the state of humanity at that point. And that's in Genesis 6:5. Every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Every thought, only evil all the time. Now, think about that. Imagine a world where every single human impulse is bent towards cruelty, violence, exploitation, corruption. Imagine the suffering of the innocent in a world like that. The vulnerable, the children, the weak. And here's the verse people skip. Genesis 6:6. It says that the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. His heart was troubled. God wasn't sitting on a throne, rubbing his hands together, going, time to punish everyone. He was grieving. He was in pain. The Father who breathed life into humanity was watching his children destroy each other, and it broke his heart. Flood wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of surgical intervention. Humanity had become so corrupted, so violent, so far gone that if God did nothing, the entire human story would have ended in self-destruction. The flood was a reset, a painful, grievous reset. And even in the middle of it, God preserved a family. Noah, 8 people. Because that's all it takes for God to keep the story going. He always preserves a remnant. And what's the first thing God does after the flood? He sets a rainbow in the sky and makes a covenant, a promise that he will never do it again. That's not the act of a tyrant. That's the act of a father who says, I know that was painful. Here's my promise going forward. Let's do Sodom and Gomorrah. Another one people point to and say, see, God is destructive. But watch what happens before the fire falls. Abraham, the man God chose to build a nation through. Abraham stands before God and bargains with him. He says, what if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you spare it? And God says yes. Abraham says 45. God says yes. Abraham says 40, 30, 20, 10. God agrees to spare the entire city for 10 righteous people. And he couldn't find 10. That's how far gone it was. The men of that city tried to assault the angels God sent. This was a place where evil had become the culture, where the innocent were being consumed. And even then, even in judgment, God sent angels to physically grab Lot and his family by the hand and drag them out of the city before it was destroyed. He literally rescued people by force because they were too slow to save themselves. That's not mean. That's mercy operating inside justice. Okay, let's talk about the law. Moses, Sinai, the 10 Commandments, and all the laws that followed. People look at Leviticus and Deuteronomy, and they see all these rules and they think, God is so restrictive. God is so demanding. But think about the context. God just pulled an entire nation out of slavery in Egypt. These people had been slaves for 400 years. They didn't have a culture. They didn't have an identity. They didn't have laws or governance or hygiene practices or a justice system. They were starting from scratch. And God steps in and says, I'm going to teach you how to live. Don't murder. Don't steal. Don't lie. Honor your parents. Rest one day a week. Take care of the poor. Don't take advantage of the foreigner. And let your fields rest. Forgive debts. When you actually read the law, not just the parts that seem strange to our modern ears, but the whole thing, it's remarkably compassionate. It's a system designed to protect the most vulnerable, the widow, the orphan, the immigrant, the poor. God built society's safety nets into the legal code of Israel 3,000 years before most civilizations even considered it. Were some of the penalties severe? Yes, because God was establishing something in a brutal, ancient world. The nations around Israel practiced child sacrifice, temple prostitution, and unspeakable cruelty as part of their worship. God was drawing a hard line. He was saying, you're going to be different. You're going to be set apart because through you, I'm going to bring salvation to the entire world. The law was never meant to be the final answer. Paul says in Galatians that the law was a guardian, a tutor, to lead us to Christ. It was always pointing forward. It was always temporary scaffolding around something permanent that was coming. Now, here's probably the hardest part, wars. God tells Israel to go into Canaan and defeat the nations living there. He tells them to drive them out. In some cases, the language is total destruction. And to our modern ears, that sounds indefensible. We have to understand the ancient world. The Canaanites' cultures weren't just other religions. Archaeological evidence and ancient texts describe cultures that burned their own children alive as offerings to Moloch. And God didn't act quickly on this. Genesis 15:16. This is a verse that changes everything. God tells Abraham that his descendants won't take the land for 400 years because, and I quote, the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. God waited 4 centuries. He gave them 400 years to turn around. That's not a God who's trigger happy with judgment. That's a God who is unbelievably patient, as he asks us to be. And when judgment finally came, it came because those cultures had become an existential threat, not just militarily, but spiritually and morally, to the people through whom God was going to bring the Messiah. This wasn't random violence. This was a father protecting the bloodline through which salvation would come to every nation on earth. Here's something people miss about the Old Testament. For every act of judgment, there are hundreds of invitations. God sends prophet after prophet after prophet: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, Amos, Micah. And what do the prophets say? They say, come back, turn around. I'm waiting for you. I still love you. Come home. The book of Hosea. If you want to understand the heart of God in the Old Testament, read Hosea. God tells the prophets to marry a woman who is unfaithful. She leaves him. She runs after other lovers. She ends up broken and being sold in a slave market. And God tells Hosea, go buy her back, bring her home, love her again. And God says, that's what I'm doing with Israel. They run from me. They chase after other gods. They break my heart over and over and over, and I keep going after them. I keep buying them back. Isaiah 11:8, God says, how can I give you up? How can I hand you over? My heart is changed within me. All my compassion is aroused. That is not a mean God. That is a God who is lovesick for his people. Now, we hit a gap. After Malachi, there are roughly 400 years of silence. No prophets, no new revelation. Israel is conquered by the Greeks, by the Romans. They're oppressed. They're waiting. They're wondering, did God forget us? For good reason. And I think that silence mattered. I think God used those 400 years to let the longing build, to let the whole world feel the weight of its need. Because by the time the first century arrives or comes around, it's not just Israel that's groaning. The whole Roman Empire is full of slavery, cruelty, hopelessness, and corruption. The whole world is crying out for something it can't name. And then, in the middle of the night, in a nowhere town called Bethlehem, in a feeding trough for animals, a baby cries. And everything changes. The sad part here is that so many people still want to believe in other gods, still want to believe in other prophets, still don't want to believe that he's a child of God. This is it. See, this is what the whole Old Testament was building towards. Every sacrifice, every law, every prophecy, every war, every covenant, every act of judgment, and every act of mercy, it was all on an arrow pointing here. God becomes man, and he makes it so clear and obvious that the only ones that don't believe it are the ones that don't want to believe it. So let that sink in for a second. The God who parted the Red Sea, who spoke from the fire on Sinai, who held the universe together with a word, he shrinks himself down into a human embryo. He submits the vulnerability of birth He gets hungry. He gets tired. He cries. He bleeds. Why? 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 Because the distance between God and humanity, the gap that sin created all the way back in Eden, God decided to close it himself. He didn't send another prophet. He didn't send another law. He didn't send another flood. He came himself. He put on skin. He walked our dirt roads. He touched lepers. He ate with sinners. He wept at funerals. And everything he did answered the accusation that God is mean. They say God doesn't care about the sick. Jesus healed them. They say God rejects the outcast. Jesus ate with them. They said God is angry. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest." They say God demands too much. Jesus said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." Jesus is God's final answer to every complaint the world has ever had about him. You want to know what God is really like? Look at Jesus. That's it. Full stop. Look at Jesus. And then we get to the cross. This is where the Old Testament and the New Testament are locked together like two puzzle pieces. Remember the animal skin in the garden, the blood covering for Adam and Eve's shame? The cross. Remember the ram caught in the thicket when Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac? The cross. Remember the Passover lamb in Egypt? Its blood on the doorposts so death would pass over? The cross. Remember the Day of Atonement when the high priest would enter the Holy of Holies with blood to cover the sins of the people? The cross. Every single one of those moments was a rehearsal, a preview, a shadow of the real thing. Because on that Friday afternoon outside the walls of Jerusalem, God did something that no one saw coming. The judge took the punishment. The lawgiver fulfilled the law. The God who had every right to condemn, condemned himself in our place. Jesus on the cross is the ultimate proof that God is not mean. Because a mean God would have just wiped us out again. A mean God would have let us rot in our sin. A mean God would have said, "You made your bed, now lie in it." But a loving God says, "I'll take your place. I'll bear your shame. I'll absorb your punishment. I'll die your death. And I'll do it willingly because I would rather die than live without you." Why would I ever want to be selfish again? Why would I ever want to live without him? Why would I ever choose me instead of we? That's the most extreme act of love in the history of existence. But it doesn't end on Friday. If it ended on Friday, we'd have a beautiful tragedy, a noble sacrifice with no power behind it. But Sunday comes, the stone rolls away, the tomb is empty, Jesus walks out of death like he's walking out of a room. And in that moment, everything, and I mean everything, changes. Because the resurrection means that the cycle is broken. Death doesn't win. Sin doesn't have the final word. The curse that entered in Genesis 3 has been shattered. The gap between God and humanity isn't just bridged, it's obliterated. And now there is hope, real hope, not wishful thinking, not fingers crossed, hoping. Resurrection hope, the kind of hope that looks at the worst thing that can possibly happen, death itself, and says, yeah, but that's not the end of the story. See, Paul says in Romans 8, if God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Do you hear that? The God who gave his own son for you. Do you really think he's mean? Do you really think he's out to get you? He's already gave the most valuable thing in the universe for your freedom. What else do you think he's holding back? So let me pull this all together. The Old Testament is not a story about a mean God. It's a story about a holy God operating in an unholy world, fighting to preserve a people and a promise through which he would rescue everyone. Every act of judgment in the Old Testament was preceded by patience, by warnings and invitations to repent. Every act of judgment was designed to protect the vulnerable and preserve the plan of salvation. And every act of judgment was ultimately pointing towards the day when God would take all judgments upon himself. The Old Testament and the New Testament God are not different gods. They're the same God telling the same story, executing the same plan. The Old Testament is the problem stated. The New Testament is the problem solved. And the solution was never a new set of rules. The solution was never a bigger army or a stricter law code. The solution was a person. The solution was God himself wrapped in human skin, hanging on a Roman cross, saying, "It is finished." It's finished. The debt is paid. The war is won. The curse is broken. The door is open. And that means wherever you are right now, whatever you've done, whatever you think about God, the invitation is open. The same God who went looking for Adam in the garden is looking for you right now. The same God who made a covenant with Noah is making a promise to you. The same God who wrestled with Jacob all night will wrestle with you until you get your blessing. He's not mean. He's not angry at you. He's not done with you. He's a father, and he wants you home. That's what I've got for you today. If this hits you, share it with somebody. If you've been carrying around this idea that God is harsh or angry or distant, I hope today cracked that open just a little bit. Go read the Bible with your new eyes. Read it looking for the love. It's on every page. And Chastity, thank you for caring so much that you wanted to share. You made an impact on my heart. I'm working on my next series just for you. It's called Know It to Believe It. Over the coming weeks, I hope to launch it and tell the critical parts of the Bible over like a 26-week period. So stay tuned. And don't forget, we are also in the process of launching our 3-year program, Building the Fish, a kingdom-size experience. Thank you, Chastity. I'm Charles Beyer, and this is the I Am Podcast. Until next time, remember who you are. You are made in the image of the great I Am, and he is with you, and he is for you. God bless. See you next week.